Welcome to Chalmers, it says.
Perfect. It was me that wasn't seeing the launch screen. Thank you very much. So everyone, this is definitely the reason why you're here today and why you're attending. This is a really great opportunity to demonstrate Chalmers and its amazing features to all of you. Chalmers, first of all, I think there's a couple of very important things to note. Chalmers is a web app, which means that it is available through any browser on any device that you own. So it could be a cell phone, a smartphone, a tablet, or a desktop computer. I'm using Chalmers right now on my desktop computer and sharing my screen, and you yourselves could do the same from your desktop or any other device. It is not a downloadable app through the App Store, so that is not a barrier. There is no download or installation required. So it's very universal and very accessible. The other piece about Chalmers, as you'll see in a moment, is that Chalmers and the entire experience is built around the simulation with speaking to, say, a friend by text. So it's like having a very personalized conversation with a friend asking about critical services in your area. So you'll see that the format is very much like a text question and answer opportunity. And that is what is called a chatbot. So through that artificial intelligence technology, we're able to create that experience in a safe environment for an individual through Chalmers. So when you visit Chalmers for the first time, it's as simple as going to chalmers.app, and you get to the Universal Chalmers website. Just to note, as Cam mentioned in the beginning, Chalmers in Halton launches next Monday, so 7 days from now. So at this moment, you cannot access Chalmers for another 7 days, but we felt it would be necessary to bring together a really great group of individuals to preview what you'll be able to experience next Monday. So we look forward to that, the big launch, so to speak. So when you first enter the website for Chalmers, you see a onboarding screen. A couple of questions are asked to the user in order to make the experience better. So there are a couple of questions in terms of who the individual is, what they're seeking, what brought them there, and what their housing situation is. The three main users for Chalmers, just so everyone is aware, tend to be the community user, so the individual that is seeking assistance. It also is often a friend or a family member of someone who needs assistance. Or lastly, it tends to be a frontline worker. So basically anyone that on the front lines working with individuals that are at risk or vulnerable that could be approaching homelessness. So it really is a tool for everyone that has access through a browser to chalmers.app. So I'll skip the onboarding questions here. It does provide a small tutorial. So as I mentioned, it is a chat text experience. So you can say phrases or type phrases into Chalmers, like I'm hungry, I need a job, I'm looking for a food bank. You could simply write looking for clothing, etc. So Chalmers recognizes keywords or what are called utterances. So when it picks up on a keyword, it will then prompt and provide a number of community resources to an individual. From there, one of the other benefits of Chalmers is that it does use your current location. This isn't mandatory. You can choose to type in a location at a later time, or you can have through GPS it know exactly where you're searching from. This is critical because Chalmers is designed in a way that it provides the closest and best immediate response to what you are seeking. Chalmers is not Google, so if you were to type in and ask for a resource, you aren't going to receive 25 results, half of which that are out of date, another portion that hours might have changed, another portion that might not even be in your vicinity. Chalmers is up to date with Ontario 211 data. And in Halton region, that would be through Halton information providers. And as we've heard, are just absolutely amazing. So across the province, we do share data and records with a number of great key partners like Halton information providers. And I must say that in the Halton region, you do have a healthy amount of records. And the more records and the more information that's inputted into these databases, the stronger that services like Chalmers becomes. So for this purpose, I'm not going to put my location or at least have Chalmers sense my location, and that's because I'm in the city of Hamilton. So Chalmers fires up. This is what the main screen looks like when you enter. Chalmers senses that I'm in the city of Hamilton, and that's because I currently am. So Chalmers knows where I am, but I am not going to demonstrate Hamilton. I'm going to demonstrate Halton for our purposes here today. So as you can see along the bottom, there are 5 core services that Chalmers recognizes and suggests to users. That includes crisis, food, things to do, for instance, recreation activities, clothing, and shelter. You can click one of these 5 prompts, or you can type into the text box at the bottom any of these keywords or phrases that may point, and then it will point you in a similar direction. So you have the choice of one or the other. So for today's demo, what I'll do is I'll choose food as the prompt. From there, Chalmers knows that I'm looking for food and asks me if I'm looking for free hot meals or am I looking for food banks. I'll choose food banks. From there, Chalmers knows what I'm seeking. I did not provide my location earlier, and I'm not going to again because I'm not currently in the region. But Chalmers, knowing that, will ask me to provide something as simple as an intersection, a landmark, or a specific address within the region. So for today, I'm just going to choose a landmark or a location, and I'm going to go with Oakville Place Mall. And just by simply typing that into Chalmers, Chalmers recognizes that location through Google Maps. It brings up that location on a map and allows me to confirm that that is in fact where I am. So I'm going to answer yes to that's my location. Chalmers found me correctly. And from there, Chalmers now has my location, knows that I'm looking for food banks. So the information immediately spits out through Chalmers in a number of text messages here back to me. So for instance, as it tells me at this exact moment, the closest food bank to me at Oakville Place is Oak Park Neighborhood Center Food Bank. It gives me the address. I see that it's 2.85 kilometers away. From there, it gives me a COVID alert because there could be some irregularities. It provides the typical operating hours. And it also tells me that this service is available to everyone. Some services may only be available to women, youth, LGBTQ, etc. If any of those were to apply to a service, it would appear in the eligibility category that you see on your screen. Also, if I need more information on this service, it gives me the phone number, the website, and it provides me a map exactly to the service I'm seeking. From there, I can click a number of prompts at the bottom. So for instance, if I click directions, I'll immediately have a map pulled up. It will show me where I am on the map and exactly the service that I'm trying to access. It tells me that it's a 47-minute walk. Alternatively, it's an 8-minute drive or a 24-minute trip with transit. So it shows me that beginning and end point. So going back to my screen, I know that they are open until 5 o'clock. So any of those transportation methods would work for me, and I would have until 5 o'clock to get there. But if, for instance, maybe this option is one that I've tried in the past and it's not the one that I'm seeking. So I choose another prompt along the bottom, and I'll choose another option. So Chalmers, knowing that this isn't the choice that I'd like to utilize today, Chalmers immediately fires up and provides me the second best option based on my location. And with that, for instance, Fair Share Food Bank Oakville pops up as the second best option based on the time and location. It gives me all of the information. I'm 4.3 kilometers away from the service. It tells me the operating hours. Today's Monday, so they are open between 10 and 2 p.m. This is critical because if I were searching for this on Tuesday at this time, it would not appear because they would not be open. So Chalmers is giving the most immediate available services available at this moment in time. So it will only display what is currently open. It gives me the maps, it gives me all of the information that you saw in the previous result. I'll show you one further feature in terms of food banks, and that is I can click along the bottom another time. So as I mentioned, Chalmers always gives you the immediate and current best result. So if, for instance, I'm not seeking the service today, but say, for instance, I want to look tomorrow at 9 a.m., I could simply type in the text box at the bottom, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Chalmers knows that I am seeking a time in the future. It will pull up the next available service or the best available service at that time. So as you can see, that service that it's suggesting is Salvation Army Food Bank, which is 10.9 kilometers away in Burlington. But that's because I chose 9 a.m. As you noticed in Oakville, most of the food banks opened at 10 a.m. But Chalmers, knowing that I'm seeking 9 a.m. specifically, it's going to give me the best option. And as you can see here, in fact, they are open at Salvation Army in Burlington at 9 a.m. So once again, this just demonstrates how smart Chalmers is in terms of understanding the time of day, the service you're requesting, and getting you immediate help at this moment or at a time you specify at a later date. So it will always give different answers based on that time. So for instance, it's like calling the operator live on the phone saying, what can I access at this moment? Except of course, Chalmers is virtual, which reduces that barrier in some cases for those that may not want to pick up the phone and call, for instance, Ontario 211. 211 is a fantastic service, but what Chalmers offers is a different route to that same information. So it's not replacing a lot of our existing amazing services like Halton information providers. Chalmers is an enhancement to some of those services as an additional feature to get individuals help they want right now. So as you could imagine, someone, a frontline worker, for instance, I worked on the front lines in Hamilton for over a decade, and I know many of us would have that traditional cheat sheet that we would tape to our monitor with whatever services we're kind of used to using, and within months, they would be out of date and the hours would change and there would be new services and we'd kind of have to start from scratch. Or you're in that position where you go to Google and you get a whole list of things, but you may not have the time to sort that out. Of course, from an end user perspective, if you need that service now, you can find that service. In Barrie, the city of Barrie, where we first launched Chalmers, the entire police force has on their computer terminals in their police cars, Chalmers available and loaded. So when they run into an individual that they see on the street, they can get this information to them right away. And as you can see, it takes seconds. It doesn't require phone calls. It doesn't require cross-referencing. It gives you the immediate answer. I'll show one or two other features before we go back to the rest of the presentation. I will show that you can pivot from this screen to other questions. So right now we were asking about food, but what happens if an individual is seeking clothing? You can simply type into the text box at the bottom, I need, let's say, clothing. Chalmers will pick up on that word. And with that, Chalmers will search the database. And with that, Chalmers is thinking, finds me the closest clothing bank, which is at our Oak Park neighborhood center, 2.85 kilometers away. So once again, you can pivot on any screen to any new search by simply typing in the text box, and then you can use all of those same filtering prompts that I previously demonstrated. You can also type a number of other keywords into Chalmers, and Chalmers reacts in a very smart way through its artificial intelligence technology. So if I were to type into Chalmers as an example, I'm depressed, Chalmers would pick up this keyword and immediately show me, as you can see, it would refer me to 911, and it would give me crisis hotlines for youth women, LGBTQ, mental health and addictions, or general crisis hotline numbers. So once again, Chalmers is more than just a robot directory. It actually is quite smart in terms of what it can do, how it thinks, and the longer that Chalmers exists, the smarter it gets. So through the menu bar at the top right, if you find any glitches or bugs in the service, if you notice hours of operation are out of date or a service is missing, you can add a new resource. You can provide feedback and indicate that there's inaccurate information or a bug. When we launch in a region, every day that passes, Chalmers gets smarter and better. So the more we use Chalmers, the more information that's put into Chalmers, the better it gets. So when we launch next Monday, we welcome your feedback. So please log on, try to confuse Chalmers if you can, tell us how you did, and we'll continually improve Chalmers. If at any point in your Chalmers experience that it does not have the information to provide to you, it will always refer you to Ontario 211 and the phone number or web chat so you can speak to a live person. So Chalmers will never leave you without a path. So with that, thank you very much for watching the demonstration, and I'm going to flip it back to Cam for our next portion.
Thanks so much, Todd. I appreciate it. It was a great presentation, great demo. I know that we're getting a lot of feedback already. And folks, if you have any questions, post them in the Q&A portion of the chat. We will get to those in a few moments. Just a quick point of clarification, Halton Information Providers is not under the Ontario 211 umbrella. They are a part of Halton Community Services Directory, led by Oakville Public Library and supported by all the Halton Community Information Centers and our local Halton libraries. So with that, let's talk statistics. CG, I'm going to pass the mic over to you for the lowdown.
Yeah, thank you, Cam, and thank you, Todd, for that great demo. Next slide, please. Okay, so Chalmers traction and success. And so I think Todd had mentioned that we are live in the city of Toronto, the city of Barrie, most recently city of Hamilton, and very soon Halton. And so what does that look like? So to date, we've actually hit over 100,000 unique users on Chalmers. And actually that's just in the city of Toronto alone. We've been live in Hamilton for almost 30 days, and we're looking to hit around 6,000 unique users in Hamilton. And so currently we're close to 30,000 unique users a month, and that's over 5 million impressions to date. We've had close to 170,000 sessions on Chalmers, and by Christmas, we're set to be in 50% of the province. So that looks like 7 major cities and regions. And I know some people in the chat have asked us about Peel. So after Halton next Monday, we'll be live in York, Peel, and Durham before Christmas, and hopefully very soon in the rest of Ontario. And so next slide. And so let's look at the demographic breakdown of Chalmers. So everything you see here is actually based on stats from 2019. So we saw about 50% of our users identified between the ages of 16 to 30. And so we've seen major adoption from youth. And the reason for that is because, time and time again, when we interview young people, and when we talk to them, people who are at risk or experiencing homelessness, they'll tell us over and over again, I don't feel comfortable calling about my situation. I'd rather spend hours on Google, than to speak to somebody. We saw more female users than male users. And if you take a look at the top left bar graph there, we saw that, majority of people were coming to Chalmers looking for help. However, the second group, the second majority were just browsing. If you take a look at the bottom left, in terms of who's using Chalmers, we actually saw that the biggest user segment were concerned citizens. So friends or family members, teachers, counselors, people that were looking for a tool to help somebody they knew. We saw that 32% of our users were first responders and frontline staff. So I'm thinking about, your Officer Jones, your social worker, caseworker, and we saw that 30% did report to be those experiencing homelessness. Next slide. Now this is 2020 data. And so this is very interesting because, in the first slide that I showed, we saw an exponential growth curve from March to now. And that's actually when COVID hit. And so we know through other proxy indicators For instance, in the GTA, domestic violence calls have gone up by 400. Food bank entries in the city of Toronto have gone up by 53%. We predict that a lot of these increase in usage is due to COVID-19. But, from a snapshot of 2020, this is the end of September, we actually saw a bunch of things increase. So on the top left, pie chart, you see that now almost 60% of users are coming to Chalmers looking for help, and 28% are indicating that they're helping someone. And so those that are just browsing have decreased to about 14%. If you look to the right and who is helping, we see that about 10% are social workers, about 3% are first responders, and the other category is very interesting because within other, we actually ask people to self-identify. And so we've seen all sorts of things like EMS, teachers, police officers, mothers, family members, counselors, nurses, all sorts of things that we can look at in an aggregate basis. Now, if you take a look at, I think the bottom pie chart, which I think is the most interesting, is that we've also noticed an increased trend of those coming to Chalmers who are hidden homeless again, right? And they're in that, they've been hidden homeless for less than 6 month mark. And these are people we believe who may be first time homeless. And so for people who don't currently have their own place, but are not living in an emergency shelter, so we suspect they're couch surfing or sleeping, in friends and families or motels and cars, about 48% of our users have indicated that they don't have their own place. About 10% at the bottom there have indicated that they're already living in an emergency shelter. So this segment here, we believe, are those who are more transitionally or maybe closer to chronically homeless. So this is very interesting, as we've seen an increase in almost in the core segments of our users. Next slide. I think that's it. So back to you, Cam.
Thank you so much, CG, for that information. Todd, now that we've seen what Chalmers is, what it can do, and how it can help people in the community to help bridge the gap between social services and community need, let's talk about what happens next.
Yes, thanks, Cam. And I am conscious of time. We do have a Q&A, so I want to give a good 10 minutes minimum for Q&A. So just briefly, we are launching in Halton next Monday. Obviously very excited with the opportunity, but this is just the first step. So we are looking for partners long-term. So if you are an agency that is joining us today, please fill out the feedback form. The link is in the chat and we will email it out afterwards as well. But let us know if you would like to have materials, advertising, Chalmers, if you would like a poster, if you would like a follow-up one-on-one meeting, we are ready to meet with you. If you would like to provide an internal demonstration to your staff or frontline workers, let us know. As I mentioned, we are looking for long-term partners. So if you're interested in this type of work and some of the data and services that Chalmers can provide, please contact us. Also, Chalmers has the ability to expand. So we could add, for instance, additional core services. We would like to have groups that we can consult with in terms of how Chalmers can grow in the long term. So we are very interested in learning from you. At Ample Labs, we are, as we mentioned, not-for-profit. We believe strongly in collaboration. So it really is important to us when we enter a community that we want to be part of the community. We aren't simply dropping you a service and leaving. We are here to invest in this service, invest in the community. So we want to be a partner around the table, and we want to continue to support Chalmers to ensure that it has the success that CG mentioned in, for instance, Toronto, and as it's having in Hamilton at the current moment. So we're really optimistic around what we look like, what Chalmers will look like long-term in the Halton region, but so far it's just been absolutely outstanding. We can see that by the number of participants that have joined us today, and the great news is we only grow from here. So thank you to everyone. I'll turn it back to Cam, and we'll have a good 10 minutes for Q&A and wrap up by noon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Todd. And I think, just to add to that too, what I find is that partnerships are very important for the success of Chalmers in terms of getting the word out? Really, word of mouth is the best way for people to realize that Chalmers is now yet another tool on their tool belt that they can use for helping people who are vulnerable or at risk in the community. So bridging that gap, and how we do that is through word of mouth. And I know that there's been some discussion in the Q&A section around, does this organization or do healthcare providers, do they have access to Chalmers? Chalmers is available to everyone. It's just making them aware that it's something that they could use. So with that, I do want to move on to the Q&A portion. I think I'm going to start off, and there's been quite the activity on there, and I'm seeing some responses already. So I do want to start off with a question around language. Is Chalmers available in a language other than English? I don't know who wants to answer that. Perhaps CG or Tom?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, people always ask us that. The short answer right now is no, but the long-term answer is yes. So our team right now is working on making Chalmers available in about 110 different languages. The problem that we see, or the approach that we want to take, is we can easily translate everything through, a Google Translate API, but there are parts of the flow that we really want to humanize, and we want to make more contextual and easy to understand for our end users. So that work has to be done by humans. And so there are actually a couple of companies we're working with and their employees to work on this translation.
CG, why the name Chalmers? That's a question from John Berg. Why Chalmers?
Yeah, people always ask us that. There's the long version of the story, but I'll give the short version. We wanted to give Chalmers a very human name, right? Because again, Chalmers is that empathetic friend that you have. And so, Chalmers may sound like a smart butler, but at the end of the day, it's to really just humanize the tool.
Do you have to create a profile to use Chalmers?
No, you don't.
And will it be made available to healthcare providers?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Word of mouth. That's the
We
big
have had some interest, Cam, just to add to that, that is a piece around expanding Chalmers. So right now we do have some health services through mental health, addictions, et cetera, that is currently available through Chalmers. But that is a longer term question around what other health services possibly could be loaded and offered through Chalmers.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. Here's another question. If dealing with someone or a client who is at another location, such as Toronto, but you're in Halton or Hamilton, once it's launched, is there a way to locate or find services in their area that are specific to them if you're using it from a different location?
So the answer to that is absolutely. So if Chalmers is available in a region, you can search that region from anywhere in Ontario, for instance. So just an example of that today is I'm currently in Hamilton and I was searching Halton. Very similarly, if you're in Halton and you want to search Toronto, you can search Toronto. So the best way to do that is when Chalmers asks your location, say you do not want it to read your current location through GPS. Instead, use the option to add an intersection or an address at that later point in time when you're searching a service, and you can search anywhere that Chalmers is currently offered. So those 7 regions and municipalities that will be live in by Christmas.
Thank you, Todd. Are there links for people experiencing dental pain?
We don't have dental as a service in Chalmers yet, so no, not yet.
And I think the takeaway from that too is whatever information is available on 211 is what will be available on Chalmers as well, but it's ever growing as well. Can Chalmers be uniquely designed where homelessness may not be the overarching priority in another region / municipality, and another priority may be central? So I guess this is where we can talk about things like poverty or mental health, which I find are in all regions, but I'll let CG or Todd take over that question.
I think one of the main benefits of Chalmers, and this is part of that larger discussion of how to develop Chalmers, what Chalmers is really good at is providing information to critical services at this moment in time. So what can you find right now? Not just a service in general, but if you need to find say a walk-in clinic right now that's available, or if you need an emergency service or you're in crisis, those type of services work quite well through Chalmers because it knows the time of day and it knows your location. But in terms of further development, I think really at Ample Labs, we're completely open to any of those discussions if it kind of fits within that model. But like I said, we are rather new. Chalmers first launched just last summer in 2019. for the first time. So there's plenty of opportunities available. So we're very interested in your feedback.
Thanks, Todd. Just have a few more questions here. It says, you mentioned, this is from Melinda, it says, you mentioned that HIP info or HIP info, so it is accessing the same info as HIP info, or MH Healthline that I currently access. Can you clarify how that is different from MH Healthline versus HIP info? I guess the difference between HIP info and Healthline. Is that something that we might be able to answer?
I mean, so the data that's currently within Chalmers for Halton region is taken directly from HIP. So we work closely with Marcus and Mark. The goal is, we currently have data for our existing services. We obviously want to broaden the services, so add in things like employment, housing, and other things like that. Now, I'm not very familiar with the other directory, but whatever is in HIP is what will be seen in Chalmers.
Thank you, CG. Is there an option to perform voice command for users who may need audio?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, accessibility. So right now, Chalmers is AA accessible. So I think voice comes into handy and is really important for folks, who may experience disabilities or things like that. But voice is something we're actually working towards hand in hand with translation. So when translation is available, voice will also be available.
Perfect. Just three more questions here. Will Chalmers be able to support folks who seek support with social services? So for example, finding childcare, accessing support for their child with special needs, helping individuals access long-term care for their senior parents. So I guess that type of help, is that available on Chalmers at the moment?
Not at the moment, but we do have a list of about 4 or 5 services that we notice are frequently asked. We have, for instance, prioritized seniors and different services under that realm. Have prioritized healthcare, and there's a number of other ones like employment and a couple others that CG mentioned. So the quick answer is no, but I think there are at least a handful of kind of obvious next steps that we will be exploring.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. There's two more questions. One of them is, if an individual was having difficulty accessing or navigating the site, in the future, is there a possibility of connecting to a person in real time or a resource staff member?
Yeah, so that would go hand in hand probably with what Ontario 211 has to offer. Chalmers is programmed to refer an individual to Ontario 211 if it isn't able to give you the information that you're seeking, or if there are no results available. So that kind of is the secondary option that would be kind of available hand in hand with Chalmers. But for the moment, it is web-based through your internet browser with Chalmers as a chatbot.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Todd. And final question before we close. What do you see as your greatest challenge right now? So what are the greatest challenges that we're facing at Chalmers right now? And I guess, how can the community help?
CG,
go ahead, Todd.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, it really is a good question, because as collaborators and as partners, this is really the question we want to ask ourselves. Like, it's CG and I the other day were talking, this is kind of our favorite question, because we want to know, what are the limitations of Chalmers? And as we mentioned, Chalmers is really good at, point in time information, critical services based on your location, the time of day. So that's what Chalmers is, but Chalmers is not a directory of 100 and odd results where you have to look through a list. So if you're looking for a directory, that would be a challenge. Also, certain regions, rural areas pose different challenges because there are fewer records and larger geographic areas. So there isn't, for instance, where public transit doesn't exist or walkability isn't an option. So what we're trying to do at the moment is trying to look at some of those challenges, understand what the user's experience is, and as we move out to some of those new areas, trying to understand how Chalmers could be designed to better meet that user's needs. So those are some of the kind of brief challenges, that we're exploring or at least addressing. But once again, it is a piece where, as we enter new areas and new regions, no two areas in the province are the same. So there's always something that we need to know, and adjust region by region.
Perfect. And just mindful of time, CG, did you want to add anything to that as well?
No, Todd said everything. Yeah, I mean, I think, we're looking at scaling Chalmers to the rest of Ontario. And I think one of the challenges with scaling is homelessness on the ground looks very different region to region. And so how do we work together to tackle the specific or the city specific or the community specific problem? And as, Chalmers sort of gets smarter and can be more contextual, we believe we can add a lot of localization to the app. So we're interested in working with you on that. Thanks.
Amazing. And on that note, we've run out of time. So Todd, I'll get us to go to the next slide because your contact information, CG's
Cam,
contact.
can I just jump in really quickly?
Yes, yeah.
We do have a question from Chantal Deguier. So she's just going to sign her question to our interpreter with ASL. And then Timothy, we're going to ask you to please interpret the question for us and we will respond. Okay, Chantal, you can go ahead.
Great, thank you. I did want to really give a big thank you for making sure that this event was accessible. I really wish that there was a bit more advertisement and information sharing, letting the deaf community know that there was an ASL interpreter. Honestly, I just really want to say a huge thank you so much for that. So please do continue with making the accessible events. I mean, really, I do have a lot of questions, but just in the interest of time, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. But in terms of the statistics, I was just wondering if you had any statistics specifically on how many people in the deaf community were using those services. That might be something to look into. And then I know that we had talked about language and translation, so that's great. But in terms of ASL or LSQ, so American Sign Language or La Langue des Signes Québécoise, I was wondering if that was a consideration. So for example, if Chalmers, if somebody who was not an English as a first language user, if they're a deaf individual trying to type, sometimes there may be spelling mistakes or some kind of uniqueness in their language, can Chalmers accommodate for that? And so if there was a way to incorporate ASL into Chalmers as a platform, that would be helpful as well. I've also noticed that, let's say, so for example, you can kind of pick if you're looking for a local food bank. And so you can either use a website or call. Really, I do think it's important that there should be text options or email options as well as a direct contact, just because deaf individuals wouldn't be using the phone. So a lot of the time, if we're in need of a service, the information will give us a lot of phone numbers, but then that means that we have to do a lot of extra work, either using video interpreters or other things like that. Sometimes we'd really like to have that direct access through text. So those are all of my questions. So really just generally, how can Chalmers be made a bit more accessible to the deaf community as a whole?
Yeah, I just want to say I love all of that feedback, Chantel. We actually are CXO. He has actually a background.
Sorry, do you mind just, for the interpreter, do you mind just spelling CXO?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Chief Experience Officer. Yes, at Ample. He actually has a master's degree in inclusive design. And so he's actually made accessibility a big priority as we go forward in scaling. So all of that advice and feedback you gave, I'll definitely take it to him because I think that's fantastic. And if you do want to chat one-on-one or reach out to him directly, because I think he would appreciate all of your feedback, we'd be happy to.
That would be great.
That. Yeah, 100%.
Great. Yeah, I was in terms of some of the voice to text options, or if there was a text to voice option. I mean, it's kind of with the artificial intelligence. I'm just wondering if it would be really able to recognize all of that. So maybe if the chief experience officer, maybe if there were some options in terms of making it more inclusive by either having a visual or picture recognition. Do you mind just letting me know the person's name?
Yeah, his name is Jordy Graham. So his email is
sorry, do you mind just spelling that again for the interpreter?
Yeah, so GEORDIE at amplelabs.co.
Great. Thank you so much.
Amazing, thank you. So with that, our time has run out, unfortunately. Thank you to everyone for participating on behalf of myself, CG, Todd, and everyone at Ample Labs. Thank you. If we didn't get to your questions, Todd and CG's contact information is on the screen there. So feel free to send them an email. Behind the scenes, a huge shout out to Alicia, Kristen at United Way, Daryl, Taylor, and John at Halton Region, Marcus and Mark at Halton Information Providers, Dave and Jackie at Ontario 211. And last but not least, our translator/interpreter, Timothy Keslick. Thanks so much for being here. Please remember to complete our feedback form. The link is in the chat. We'll also circulate the link tomorrow by email, along with a private YouTube link for a recording of today's webinar. Halton, get ready. Your launch is on Monday, October 26th, so just 1 week away. And remember, spread love, not germs. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Appreciate it.